Homer wrote the greatest poem in the ancient world, and in all of it, across thousands of lines, he never once called the sea blue. He called it wine dark. He called honey green. He called sheep violet. And for a while, in the 1800s, serious scholars looked at that and came to a genuinely wild conclusion. They decided the ancient Greeks must have been colorblind, that they physically couldn't see blue at all. So here's the question. Did ancient humans see fewer colors than we do? Or flip it. Did they see more, and we're the ones who went blind? Seriously, sit with that for a second because the answer is stranger than either version. This isn't a small question. This goes back further than farming, further than writing. The eye we're talking about is older than our species. It was already finished tens of millions of years before anyone wrote a word. And by the end of this, the answer is going to reach right into your own head and change something about how you see the wall in front of you right now. I mean that literally. There's a piece at the end that's about you. There are really two questions tangled together here, and pulling them apart is the whole game. The first one is the obvious one. Could their eyes physically see the same colors yours can? And the second one, the far more interesting one, is whether seeing a color and having a word for it are the same thing at all. Hold on to that second one. It's the key to everything. Let's start with the eye, because to understand any of this, you have to picture what seeing color even is, biologically, before language ever touches it. Deep in the back of your eye are cells, called cones. You've got three kinds, one tuned to reddish light, one to green, one to blue. 3 cones firing in combination is what lets you see the full rainbow. And here's the thing most people never stop to consider. That 3-cone setup is ancient. It didn't show up with the Greeks or with humans or anywhere close. It evolved in our primate ancestors somewhere around 30 to 40 million years ago when a gene for detecting green light accidentally duplicated and one copy drifted toward red. Before that, our ancestors were basically 2-color creatures, the way most mammals still are. Your dog sees the world in muted blues and yellows. Somewhere back in the trees, that changed. And then it just stopped changing. It locked in, which means Homer's eyes were not primitive. They were not a lesser model. They were the exact same hardware sitting in your skull right now. Same 3 cones, same wiring to the brain. If you could pull an ancient Greek out of 800 BC and give him an eye exam, he'd pass it identically to you. Movies love to paint the ancient world as this squinting, half-formed version of us. On this one, the movies have it exactly backwards. His eye was a match for yours, down to the cell. So the colorblind theory is dead, right? Dead on the biology. Case closed. Not even close. Because now we hit the part that should be sitting in the back of your mind, nagging. If his eyes worked perfectly, if the blue of that Greek sea was pouring into his retina exactly the way it pours into yours, then why in the name of everything did he call it the color of wine? That's not a Homer problem. That's the crack that opens the whole thing. Because it turns out Homer wasn't a weird exception. In 1858, a British scholar named William Gladstone, the same man who'd later become Prime Minister 4 separate times, sat down and did something nobody had bothered to do. He counted. He went through all of Homer and tracked every single mention of color. Black shows up constantly. White, constantly. Red, plenty. And blue? Blue essentially never appears. The sky is never blue. The sea is never blue. The sea is never blue. There isn't even a clean standard word for it in the Greek. The word later Greeks used for blue, kaianos, shows up in Homer meaning something closer to just dark. And once you notice it in Greek, you start seeing it everywhere. Look across ancient languages and blue is the one that keeps going missing. Not because those people had broken eyes, because they hadn't named it yet. Here's where it gets strange. In 1969, 2 Berkeley researchers, Brent Berlin and Paul Kay, compared how nearly 100 languages carve up color. And they found something almost eerie. Languages don't add color words randomly. They add them in an order, almost the same order, over and over. In cultures that never touched each other, first a language splits the world into dark and light. Then, always, the next word is red, then green and yellow. And blue? Blue shows up last, nearly every single time. dead last in line. Think about that. Cultures on opposite sides of the planet, no contact, no shared history, and they reach for their color words in the same sequence, like they're all following one hidden script. Red first, blue last. Every time. Why red before blue? The best guess is brutally practical. Red is blood. Red is fire. Red is the ripe fruit against green leaves, the thing that keeps you alive or tells you something's wrong. You need a word for red. Blue, on the other hand, where actually is it? Take away the sky and the sea, two things you can't touch, can't hold, can't point at, and blue nearly vanishes from the natural world. There are almost no blue plants. Blue animals are rare. Blue rocks, blue dirt, barely a thing. A culture doesn't invent a word for a color it never has to pick up and use. Blue was the last color to get a name because, on the ground, in your hand, it was the last one that mattered. So the ancients weren't seeing less. They were naming less. But now, and this is the part I've been building toward, you might be thinking, fine, they saw blue, they just didn't have the word. The word is just a label slapped on top. The seeing underneath is the same, right? Maybe not. And this is where it stops being a story about dead Greeks and becomes a story about you. Because there's this tribe in northern Namibia, the Himba, and researchers led by D.B. Roberson and Jules Davidoff spent years studying how they handle color. The Himba language doesn't split blue and green the way English does. It folds them, along with certain other shades, under shared terms. One word covers ground that we chop into two totally different colors. Now, you've maybe heard the dramatic version of this, that the Himba literally cannot see blue, that shown a blue square among green ones, they're blind to it. Let's be honest about something, because this matters. That extreme version was staged. It was set up for a 2011 BBC documentary, and the researcher, whose real work it was borrowed, has said plainly there's no finding where a Himba person simply failed to spot the odd color. So, no. They're not blind to it, but here's what the real research does show, and it's subtler and far more unsettling. When a Himba speaker looks for a blue tile in a ring of green ones, a difference that jumps out at you instantly, they're slower. They make more mistakes. The boundary that's razor sharp in your mind is blurry in theirs. Not because their eyes are different, because their language never drew the line, and without the line, the difference is harder to grab. And before you file that under exotic faraway tribe, turn it on yourself. In 2007, a team led by Jonathan Winnower tested Russian speakers. Russian doesn't have one word for blue. It forces you to split light blue and dark blue into two separate basic colors, the way English forces you to split, say, red and pink. And when Russian speakers had to tell two blues apart, they were faster than English speakers, measurably. Their language had carved a border English never draws, and that border sped up their eyes. Read that again. The words you happen to know are changing how fast you can tell two colors apart. Right now, in your own head. You're telling me the language I speak is reaching down and editing what I perceive? Yes. Yes, it is. Not inventing colors out of nothing. The light is the light. The cones are the cones. But where you draw your lines, which differences leap out and which ones you have to hunt for, that's being quietly shaped by the vocabulary you were handed as a kid. Your color words are like the folders on a desktop. The files are all there either way. But how fast you find them depends entirely on how someone decided to sort them. There's one last layer, and I saved it for the end, because it's the strangest part of all of this. We tend to think we're the finished version. That we've got all the colors now, the full set, and the ancients were the incomplete draft. But that's the trap. Because there's no reason to believe the sorting is done. Somewhere out there right now is probably a distinction your language never taught you to make. Two shades sitting side by side that some future vocabulary, or some other culture's vocabulary, splits cleanly in two, while you look at them and see one thing. You are, in this exact moment, doing to some color what Homer did to blue, looking straight at a difference and not quite seeing the seam. So, did ancient humans see more colors than us? Here's the real answer, and it's better than the myth. Their eyes saw everything yours do, same 3 cones, same 30-million-year-old hardware. The sea just as blue on their retina as on yours. What they didn't have was the word. And it turns out the word isn't just a label. The word is a tool that reaches back into perception and sharpens it, carving borders, speeding up your eye, deciding which differences pop and which ones hide. The ancients didn't see a smaller world. They saw the same world, sorted into fewer boxes. And so do you. You've just got a few more boxes and you mistook that for seeing more. Homer looked out at that Greek sea and reached for the closest word he had, and the closest word was wine. Not because the water wasn't blue. Because blue, for him, hadn't been born yet. And the unsettling part? Somewhere in what you're looking at right now, there's a color still waiting for its name. You just can't see the line.